Okay, so Might'll be along in a moment. Today we're going to talk about that infographic that we made last year, Permies.com/heat. I know that Mud and I spent about 10 months working on it, and the way it came to be I thought was really fascinating. I started a thread saying something along the lines of, how do I get the concept of rocket mass heaters into like 100 million brains? And our Permies.com audience came out in droves. But the hilarious thing is that each person would, you kind of get the impression of not reading anybody else's posts, because the same thing would be brought up several times. And they would say, if you solve my odd little problem, the whole world will then fall in line and learn about rocket mass heaters. And then we would say, we solved that little problem. Now, most of the time, they just didn't reply after that. But the few that did would say, oh, wait, but there's another one. And it's the second thing. Well, we solved that too. And then that's when that person would usually disappear. So kind of felt like we didn't get the advice we were really looking for on how to reach 100 million people with rocket mass heater stuff. But we kind of found this other message that was hidden in there, which was that if we help somebody and we get them going, they've got another issue and another issue and another issue that they want to have solved. And so the infographic, we decided to make an infographic. And the funny thing is that, well, there's a couple of funny things. First, Andreas started making an infographic like that day. It's like, dude, we got to work out all the data. We got to get all the numbers just right, because we know people are going to contest it. And so, so then we turned to people and we're like, okay, let's divvy this up. It's going to be like 24 rows and it'll be like a dozen columns. So who wants to take on this one? And it turned out that it was nobody. And who wants to take on this one? And it turned out to be nobody. And so in the end, Mud and I did all of it. We would get together a couple of times a week for a few hours and then take one of the rows and then do some deep research on the numbers to get the numbers to be rock solid. Now, the funny thing is that while we were composing this, the cost of electricity and the cost of natural gas and the cost of pellets for pellet stoves all went, and the cost of propane, they all went up. They all went way up. And we're like, we can't just sit here and keep modifying this document forever. So we just locked down the numbers that we had and cranked it out. I think the infographic is stellar. And I thought, oh, great. Now we're going to share this. We're going to put this out there. And we're going to have, I don't know, 100 million people within a few months looking at this and understanding all these things and stuff like that. And Paul won't say it, but I will. Please like, subscribe, and share. Okay. Sorry, I shouldn't. There's Mud. It's about damn time.
Hey.
So I'm trying to tell the story of how the infographic came to be. And so we finished it, we put it out there, and I thought immediately it was going to get 100 million people and it was going to change the world. Everybody's going to talk about it. And it was crickets. And it was like, I mean, we did get, I shouldn't say crickets. We got 6,000 people who came to the thread at Permies, where we keep the infographic, Permies.com/heat. And on top of that, the real sting, the real kick in the gut was I shared it with my audience, which is a mailing list of 122,000 people. And I guess I learned a lot of people just, I don't know, they were already so sure about this that they didn't need to go look at the infographic, I guess. I don't know. So now we've got the video out. Mud, did you see the new video?
I did. Looks
Is
good.
okay.
I
2
don't have to
minutes
read
long.
anymore. I can just look at it.
It's about 2 minutes long, and we have a new style of making videos where we're trying to compress 10 minutes of information into 2 minutes. And so it's super tightly edited. That's thanks to Andreas, who's managing our thing today. But Bo, I know that you're only here for a little bit, for a few minutes, but that you were helping us to chase down numbers in the early days. And it's I know I can turn to Mud and ask this, but since you're here for just a minute, I believe it is really difficult to not only find the numbers, but find reliable numbers that, if you link to your references, that people will find those to be a qualified reference.
Sure.
Well, that was easy. Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is really squishy. You go ahead, Mud.
There's lies, damned lies, and statistics, I believe is what they say.
Accurate.
And everybody, every part of the industry has a vested interest in massaging it to make it look good for what we're doing. So you look it up on a natural gas heating website, and it'll tell you one thing, and you look it up on with the guys with the mini splits, and they'll have some glowing numbers. And so we had to go through a lot of numbers and kind of get an idea of, and if we found 3 people who hate each other and agree on a number, we kind of went for that.
I do think that when we have shared the document with audiences that are snotty, that they choose to be snotty without looking at the references. And it's like, so one that I remember was that how heat pumps, the average lifespan of a heat pump is 14 years. And then we had 3 different people who then chimed in to say that that's not true, because they know of a heat pump that's more than 14 years old. And it's like, have you learned about what average means yet? Are we allowed to speak of average? I mean,
or declining performance over time.
The Centennial bulb is, I believe, 115 years old. It's been burning for 115 years, but we still say an incandescent light only lasts 1,000 hours, even though that's not true either. And so it's kind of like, all right. So, and I believe 14 years of lifespan came from a website that sold heat pumps, if I remember correctly. I mean, we can go look it up. We cited all of our references, and we did a lot of stuff. The other thing about the infographic is we made all the numbers be for Montana, not only because I live in Montana, but also because Montana is well known to be a very cold state. And when we tried talking about this kind of thing before, everybody wanted to talk about Florida and about Virginia and California. And it's kind of, well, those, might not be as cold. And so I don't know, it got squirrely. And so we needed to nail it down and get some hard statistics for just one state.
The other thing that we ran into was like, the experts are usually an expert in a very narrow study. Like there may be a heat pump expert that knows nothing about the manufacture of their actual device and the footprint of that sort of thing. So I feel like an instrumental aspect of this was, I think it's articulated well in Alan Booker's presentation about the potential for a rocket mass heater to be actually carbon negative, discussing site and source EUI. I feel like that's a part of this that's really hard for even experts in their field to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but we did the legwork, and it took us 10 months. But we got the infographic out, and I think it's a rock solid document, backed with sources. And so all those are out there. The only problem with the document is that the cost of a lot of that stuff, like all the electric options, the gas options, pellets, the propane, those are probably all about 35% higher, maybe 40% higher right now. But of course there was a row in there about, is it vulnerable to market volatility? And so those are the ones that are indeed vulnerable to market volatility. So, all right, real quick, I have a thing to insert in our discussion today. Real quick, I want to say, so we're doing this live, and it's going out to a bunch of different places, YouTube and some other things, and then later we'll put it out onto the podcast stream. And I just want to say, I think that the podcast is currently not even getting 5% of the stuff I think I should be pouring into the podcast. I think that there's a couple of hundred different bits and bobs of topics, of just general topics. There were some great things. We finished up the Garden Master course, and there were some really powerfully important things brought up that are like, that's an amazing podcast topic. And it's like, we got to find ways to get more of this out. There's so much more. So today, I mean, this infographic has been out since I think October, and we haven't recorded a podcast about it. I mean, that and the document itself is so extremely profound. We're not even going to touch the whole document today. I think each row is worthy of an entire podcast of its own. All right. So I just want to say that there's so much information that I feel like I got to share. And I like to believe that probably 80% of the stuff that we put into the podcast is stuff that I don't think is anywhere else on the internet. I think it's pretty unusual. For those of you that listen to the podcast, does that seem fair? And listen to other podcasts, maybe, does that seem fair? Is it relatively unusual, the stuff that we put into our podcasts? And so,
yeah, I would say so.
Okay. So, and we've got tons more that we got to get in there that we just haven't been. All right. Covering the bits covered in the new YouTube video. So, one thing I want to say, I don't know if we could put the link up for it, is that I made a thread. I just had this last second idea. I made a thread, and I said that if a whole bunch of people put coin in, we would have possibly $5,000. And if we get $5,000, that means that we can show that video. We'll just put it into the YouTube promotion thing where YouTube says, give me your money. And then you put it in. And if we put $5,000 in, my guess is that we will get 500,000 views of this one video. Okay, so is this the link to the, okay, there's the link to the new video, which doesn't work if there's not a space before HTTPS. But I was thinking about a link to the money grubbing. Where's that thing about the $5,000? If somebody could post a link to that, that'd be cool. I don't remember what the thread number is or anything like that. But so far, it's like $150 we've gotten. And it might be a lot more than that. I haven't checked in the last hour or so. And there's a monthly-ish going out. I did check just before we started recording, and it wasn't even a quarter of the way out yet. So hopefully by the end of the day today, we'll have hit $5,000, and we can put that into YouTube, and we can get that thing to have. I just think that'd be great if that could get a 500,000 views. because I think it's important. I think it does change things dramatically, and I think the video is delicious. So, covering the bits and bobs in the new YouTube video. One of them, the very first thing we start off with is cost to install. So, can we kind of zoom in a little bit on the document? I can kind of see it. Maybe I should pull it up in another window. It's easy enough to do. Hermes.com/heat. And then there it is. And we made it so it's easily visible without having to go to the super jumbo version. So to heat a home, and the average home in Montana is conveniently 2,000 square feet. I think if I remember correctly, it was actually something like 2,004 square feet, but we just said 2,000 square feet. It makes all of our math really easy. So if you're going to put electric baseboard in the entire house and have it professionally installed, that would be $4,000. Now, usually when people talk about heat pumps and how awesome heat pumps are, how absolutely amazingly great heat pumps are, they talk about how they're only $10,000 to put 3 of them into a home, but they cut your heating bill 70%. So they're doing a little accidental mix and match, because there's 2 basic types of heat pump. There's the mini splits, which are cheaper and easier to install, and they just grab heat from the outside air and use their pumpy pump function for that. And there's the in-ground heat pump, which costs $26,000 to install instead of $10,000 to install. And that one gives you much bigger savings. It cuts your heating bill much more. So, but when you try to talk to people about heat pumps, it's like as cheap as this much to install, and the savings are possibly this much. And so it's kind of like, okay, let's break this down. If you're going to do mini splits, it generally cuts about 30% off of your heat bill. Is that right? Did I do my math correctly? Yeah, about 30%. But then if you get the in-ground heat pump, it'll cut about 65% off of your electric heat bill. But granted, that's a comparison where you're already starting off with the most expensive heating option to compare to. So, I mean, am I the only one that's getting flooded with stuff about how awesome heat pumps are, and let's convert everybody over to heat pumps? I'm getting just slammed with this information. Is it just me? Are there others that are seeing all this, that are seeing this flood being put forth by general media, and organizations like permaculture organizations or other environmental organizations? Mud, are you seeing this?
Yeah, they're pretty popular, and the advertising budgets are pretty big for some of these companies. And of course, I've also been doing research on them, which means that my social media gets flooded with advertisements for it. So the echo chamber gets pretty loud pretty fast if you're looking for something on the internet.
I'm seeing a lot of articles in magazines and articles in other online media, and, full on articles. And it just seems like, wow, who's paying for this massive PR push? And
infotainment, man.
On top of that, I have had people that I know, not just one, but many people I know, trying to push it to me to sell, to like, I have to go tell everybody about how great this is, how great heat pumps are. And so just push. And I've had some friends be upset with me that I'm advocating for rocket mass heaters because, you know, I should be taking all of my resources and telling people about heat pumps. So in a way, that's what I'm doing today, right? So now, granted, in the end, I think we do a great job of making it clear how important the rocket mass heater is over the heat pump. But at the end of the video, our actual recommendation is for both. And there's a fascinating thing about insurance that we'll get to possibly later, or maybe that's a whole other podcast, where, you know, it's best to have both. But let's set that aside for now. Getting back to cost to install. So in-ground heat pump, the average is $26,000. And again, we've had some pushback on that, as some people have been able to get it done for less than the average. And we also mark it off that installing an in-ground heat pump is not for DIY. And I think I've had one person contact me to say that's bullshit because they did it themselves. But then they're also a person that did also, you know, like they installed these for people. And it's like, kind of doesn't count, does it?
A professional can DIY, and it's kind of a different thing.
Right, right. I do think that an amateur could DIY this. It is, but it's like the level of DIY knowledge that is required to pull it off, I think, is very substantial. I'm going to make up a thing. And I think Mud and Bo are going to be used to hearing this, because I say, when you build a rocket mass heater, that requires a DIY level 3. But if you're going to build a batch box rocket mass heater, that requires a DIY level 5. And I'm going to go on to say, if you're going to try and put in an in-ground heat pump yourself, that requires a DIY level 7 or maybe 8. So I'm throwing out some wackadoodle numbers here. I do think that this is going to be the reverse logarithmic scale, like the Wheaton Eco Scale. But Bo and Mud, would you guys choose different numbers than 7 or 8?
I think some people do their own appendectomies and stuff too. I mean, just they're convinced that they can do everything themselves because they saw it on a YouTube video. I know I've gotten myself in trouble that way. Thinking, oh, I saw it on YouTube, I can do this myself, and then had to hire somebody to tear out what I did and put in the right thing. But yeah, it's a specialized knowledge. We have simple versions of the rocket heater that are maybe gonna cut your fuel bill in half. That anybody who is minorly handy could do, and we have some that are really kind of specialized, and you go from a Mr. Cool kit where you don't even need a vacuum pump for a mini split to hooking up a something you've got to dig trenches for 10 feet deep in a yard, and that's a whole nother level. That might even be a 9, even if it's just for access to equipment.
Fair. Bo?
Yeah, I think that's legit. I mean, I've done the DIY mini splits in my house, and that's like, after you run electrical, that's about 4,000, and usually that's the less portion when you have it professionally installed. So 8 to 10 is pretty standard. Higher if you're doing multiple rooms, maybe a touch lower if you've got like a 1-room studio or something.
I think that the numbers we got on here are rock solid, and mini splits are much less expensive to put in and much easier. I would say that if you're going to put in your own mini splits, you're looking at DIY level 5. Yeah. And so, I mean, part of it is you got to route some ducts through some walls and things like that.
If you're used to doing your own electrical work, it's not a big deal. But if anything beyond a light switch is a stretch, then it's a stretch.
Yeah. Yeah. So the key is that if you're gonna, and mini splits kind of seem to be the way people are going, and if you're gonna do it yourself and you're gonna put 3 of them into a house, into a 2,000 square foot house, it's going to be about $4,000 just in materials costs.
And to have it for 3 of them, that's low.
Well, let me do this slightly different way. Let me qualify a little bit. A year ago, it would have been about $4,000. Okay, Bo is making faces like, yeah, I could go for that.
Yeah, you're close enough.
So one of the things we ran into doing our research was the difference between the cost of a DIY quality unit, and they might even appear to be the exact same model on the surface, but you buy it at a big box DIY store, and it's a lot cheaper than the one that is that the professional is gonna install. Sometimes because the professional's got to have a 10-year warranty on it, and it's got to be reliable. And the thing that you buy for DIY you'll get it for a lot cheaper, and the internal parts are cheaper, and it's not going to last as long, and nobody's going to help you out if something goes wrong. So there is a wide range. And we looked pretty hard for averages, so you go out and you do your research, and this infographic's a nice place to start to make some comparisons. But then you go out and you look, and you find out, oh my goodness, one of the places in town closed, so the other one raised their prices 40%, or oh look, they're having specials on such and such, so I'm going to do that. Or I just learned how to do this bit, so I'm going to spend a little more money on hardware that I know how to work with, but save myself $3,000 in install costs. All of these are very real for different people, and we can only put the averages of what was reported to the world on our infographic, and hopefully that's handy enough to people to make it worth it.
I think along those lines, I'm not sure if I mentioned this in an earlier podcast, but I know it's something I've been talking probably too much about to the unfortunate people who come into my circle. And that is the overall, I kind of feel like the sleeve of today is, I'm going to make up a number of 10 times greater than 30 years ago. So the lies and whatever else that they do just is so much more. So I just kind of feel like I am concerned that these products might fall shy of being honest and wholesome, and that we're going to get 6 years down the road and discover things that are awful, or people go buy it and then they install it only to find out that there's some ugly sleeves that was woven into their product, and now it's going to cost $2,000 more or something like that. So I have concerns. I'm weary of the sleeves of today. And this is one of the reasons why I advocate that people garden, because then you know the story of your food. Whereas I kind of feel like even if you go to an organic store and it says it's organic, I now know enough about this stuff where I kind of feel like it isn't. It's got a bunch of sleeves woven into that too. All right. Oh, sorry. It's my own little ranty rant kind of a thing. All right. Cost to install in-ground heat pump, $26,000. It's going to take a lot of winters for that to pay itself off. And then the mini splits is $10,000. This is for professionally installed. And then in mud, I know that you have gone, like people have paid you to come to their home and professionally install a rocket mass heater. I gotta say that probably a good 15 to 20% of the cost is going to be to get the vertical exhaust to go through the roof. And but the number we wrote down, I trusted you because you know other builders too, other rocket mass heater builders, other professional rocket mass heater builders. And so the number we have written down here is $7,500.
Yep.
Does that include travel costs for you?
That's a good average. If I'm doing it in my home territory, or have a circuit that I'm going to do, we can get it a little lower. If they've got some funky thing at their place, like a need for some sort of telehandler to get stuff up on the roof to put a chimney liner down, that starts to get way expensive. So professional install can get really expensive. I mean, one of my great heroes, Jim Shawls, is a rocket heater builder. Has built some amazing cob and batch box rocket heaters for heating, quite big houses, and he won't touch one for less than 23,000 now, just because of the sheer amount of labor that goes into having something as artistic as he wants to do, as fine as he wants to do, be in there. And on the other hand, a Liberator rocket heater and a mass bench and a double wall chimney from the local Tractor Supply place. That for the DIY person, or even if you hire somebody to put it in, it's going to take 2 days to install that at the most. So there's a wide range there.
How much is the Liberator right now? Do you know?
It's a little less than $3,000 with shipping.
Okay.
The
got down here, the cost to install DIY is $1,900. I know that there are people out there, and it seems like I tell people the average is $400, but we wrote down $1,900. And a big reason for that is we're including in the total cost to install, and we just assumed 100% of installs are going to need to put in some sort of hole in the roof for the vertical exhaust. Yep. Whereas it seems to me like a lot of the people I've talked to that are they're taking out a conventional wood stove, or they already have the hole in the roof and they're putting in a rocket mass heater. And so I kind of think like, oh, okay, if you leave that out, and it seems like kind of average around $400. And so the biggest part of that expense is the hole in the roof stuff. And so, but I would say like the one in the Fisher Price house, we probably spent something on the order of, I'm going to guess, not even $2,000 on it. Although the hole in the roof stuff, we did have to spend probably in addition to that, because there wasn't already a hole in the roof. I think we probably put a good $800 in the hole in the roof just for materials. But it seems to me like for a lot of people who already have a hole in the roof, 400 as an average for materials cost sounds about normal. What do you think?
I think it's a little low given what ceramic wool, ceramic board costs have done. But as a year ago, that was a good number when we came up with it. And there's a whole subgroup that I really like to encourage that you can build these almost entirely out of mud and rocks and old brick that people were throwing away. That can be done with scrap metal almost for almost free, if not free, for parts. And if you love doing it, then you don't feel the labor as much. You get a bunch of your buds together and do it. That is accessible in a way that a mini split even isn't. That's accessible in a way that that a baseboard heater, electric baseboard heater, might not even be accessible. And certainly, the cost, getting the ability to get fuel from your local forest or dumpster even is super valuable as time goes by, because the fuel can end up costing more than the heater did.
So I know that we when we put in the cost of fuel, so maybe now is a good time to start moving into talking about annual operation costs, which is dominantly going to be fuel, whether that fuel is electricity or the fuel is wood. I think one of the things that we did for all of the wood burning contraptions, except for pellets, is that we said everybody gets a free half cord. And that half cord came from the branches and twigs that naturally fall off the trees in your yard. Now, not everybody has that. And so we tried to do a little bit of math across Montana to try to calculate, an average of who does have that option. And then we also said, okay, well, another one is wood scraps from your wood shop. Well, not everybody has a wood shop. And so we try to do some averages there. And then there's the concept of being able to burn some cardboard and junk mail. And then the papery bits that would otherwise go to the landfill. Whereas here, like at my house, next to every garbage can, we have a paper sack. And we just know that the paper sack is where we put our burnables, our clean burnables. And sometimes we just burn the whole paper sack as a fire starter, or, more often we burn pieces. We take what's in the paper sack out and burn that. So basically we gave everybody a half cord for this variety of different burnable things that are free burnables, free heat, free whatevers. Now, a rocket mass heater can heat a home with just a little over half a cord of wood. I hope to someday get it under a half a cord of wood, but we're still working on that. So basically, it doesn't leave very much. And then for the rest of the wood, we kind of went with the cost. There's a place that we found that said the Montana average for firewood cost is. And then, and so we started there, and I think we stuck to that number. And because it seemed like that number was kind of low, so it may have been a little outdated, but we were thinking that, well, a lot of people go and get their own firewood, and then at the same time, maybe 20 to 30% of people have enough firewood within 100 yards of their home that they don't need to get a giant 4x4 truck with 6 chainsaws and 4 cans of fuel to go out into the woods, pulling a trailer to come back with all the firewood. And then don't forget to make 3 or 4 trips out, and you also need to stock grandma's firewood too. But we kind of tried to do, so we ended up just sticking with the number that was presented as the average firewood price per cord in Montana to come up with these numbers. Now, all right, in-ground heat pump, when it comes to annual operation cost, mini splits, $1,300. In-ground heat pumps, less than half of that, $606. And then a rocket mass heater, $15. And so that's assuming that you buy the firewood. So in theory, you would buy 1 cord of firewood and it will last you maybe 10 years because there's so little of it that you need to augment the cord of firewood that you're putting in, the half cord that you get for free. Okay. Any more comments about annual operation or about the cost to install?
I think for annual operation, a lot of people feel really empowered by not having to have the whatever the energy exchange is to get fuel going through the economic and tax system. I mean, when there's a certain pleasure to not paying 15, 20, 30% tax overall on the on the wood you bought, and not paying for the transportation of that from God knows where, and not paying for refining it into pellets or some sort of liquid or gas, and having that much more of your heat in your own control, like growing a garden. And if your wood got wet, or you didn't split enough, and you got to dig for it under the snow, and it's your own fault, there's a certain niceness to that some people like. And you can do that with wood, especially with the little scrap wood that we're talking about for rocket heaters, or scrounge it. And it's kind of hard to scrounge electricity. It's kind of hard to it's easy to scrounge some red brick and some clay to make a rocket heater. It's kind of hard to scrounge a mini split. So these are empowering, like having a garden or a barter system, in ways that or a gift economy, in ways that your electric bill and your and your installation of an industrial product aren't.
I think another way of saying what you are saying is the level of sleaze that you have to endure with some of these other options is a price that's not calculated in. Maybe the chart should have included how much sleaze do you have to swallow in order to be able to have this. When I bought this property, we have 2 properties here. We have the lab and base camp, and so the lab is off grid, and base camp is on the grid. When I arrived at base camp, it had a propane tank. And then let me just say, I'm going to go out and say the sleaze factor was immense. It was just lies and sleaze and over and over and over again. And when I visited with others that live in other states, basically it's like, oh, that's the industry standard. And on top of that, when you talk about why am I paying $4 a gallon when this place down in Missoula sells it for $1 a gallon? And it's like they just change the price to whatever they think they can get away with. So the sleaze factor is tremendous. So I think part of what you're saying is that for electricity or natural gas or some of those others, there's also a bit of a sleaze factor. I haven't experienced any sleaze with my electric stuff, and I don't have natural gas, but I have heard from a lot of different people. Like I've observed people in Missoula being very upset because of the rate hikes, and I kind of feel like that's just how electricity is always going to be. I feel like the rates are not too bad, at least here in Montana right now. I know that it was something like 10 cents a kilowatt hour, and it's gone up. It's been a pretty big bump in the last year or two. And a lot of people are very angry that it went up. And I kind of feel like, yeah, that's the nature of this beast. It's going to go up, and you really have no control. And they felt it was sleazy. I guess I don't count that in the world of sleaze. The thing that I think is sleazy is if it's going to be like, oh, it's 10 cents a kilowatt hour, and now here's your bill, and it's like, yeah, but why am I paying 20 cents a kilowatt hour? Oh, there were fees and shit, and so you just have to eat that. And I don't want to eat it. In fact, some of these fees are illegal. Some of these fees are not allowed. Some of these, and then, and frankly, I would question this and I question that. That would be sleaze. But I have not experienced that here in Montana. But I've heard of people having that problem in other places, where there's a bunch of shenanigans on the bill. And there's also other shenanigans about getting connected and stuff like that. So basically, when you run a rocket mass heater, it's so little wood, and there's not any sleaze when you go out and there's a branch on the ground that fell off the tree, and you take the loppers and you lop it up into some smaller pieces and you throw it in a box, and then a few months later you heat your home with it. To me, that seems pretty sleaze free. Which I think for a lot of homesteaders, this is kind of what they're looking for is I'm going to go live way out in the sticks so I can get away from all the sleaze in the city. And you can't get away from it entirely, but you can get away from it for quite a bit. So you can grow your own food, you can grow your own fuel, and therefore dodge the sleaze. Okay, I'm going to go on. I'm ready to go on to the next piece. Are you ready? We're good? All right. The next piece is carbon footprint. And so in the new video that just went out, we said we're getting a lot of attention to heat pumps today because we are being told that this is what is best for the environment. For the sake of the environment, everybody needs to switch over to heat pumps. And so, and the number one metric is carbon footprint. Now, already in the video that we just put out, we've got people saying all this stuff about carbon footprint is a bunch of lies. Climate change is lies, carbon, so it's like, hey, I'm not even talking about whether that's real or not. It is, just set that aside. What is real is that I'm getting flooded from environmental groups telling me that you have to switch over to a heat pump because it's the best for the environment. And their number one environmental thing is carbon footprint. And so a rocket mass heater has a carbon footprint that is less than 5% of the best heat pump. And yet they don't talk about a rocket mass heater. So I feel like that is rather unkind. And so when we're talking about what's good for the environment, I want to call shenanigans. That's, they're pushing the heat pump for the sake of the environment, and I want to say, shame on you. That is lies. Okay. Anybody have anything else to add about carbon footprint on our lovely heat infographic?
I want to shout out to Alan Booker's research. There's a lot of comparisons of the carbon footprint of operating different types of heaters, the operation cost, the carbon footprint of running fuel oil as opposed to natural gas, as opposed to propane, as opposed to electric or the mini split. But very little of it takes into account the infrastructure requirements for creating and transporting those high-tech devices to the place where we're going to use them, and then having the infrastructure to power them if you're using electric or natural gas, or having a truck fill up with propane and make the last few miles to the tank on your place. Any of those is connecting you to a long tube that goes all the way back to India or China or wherever that stuff was manufactured. And so that environmental footprint goes back before you plugged it in your house and turned it on and warmed your Tootsies. And then it goes on when after you're done with the thing, because you can't get parts for it anymore and you've chucked it out, chucked it away. Those calculations that Alan's been working on suggest that the best possible scenario of powering your mini split with solar energy, or your in-ground heat pump with solar energy, right there on your site, your rocket and building the best house you can build, to need a smaller one of these things, your rocket heater is going to be about a third the environmental footprint. If you cut and harvest your own wood on site, and those roots going down into the ground for those trees sequester carbon more than you're burning it. That all those things add up together to be at best, your mini split is 3 times the carbon footprint of your rocket heater. And there are other things we like about mini splits that makes them very convenient. And we'll talk about that, I guess, a little later. But if we're comparing the carbon footprint, I think a lot of environmentally conscious people get fixated on the smoke, or the cry of smoke, local pollution, and ignore the vast trail of destruction that goes with using petrofuels or high-tech devices to heat our houses.
Because the pollution is away. It's not here.
It's away. It's someplace else. Somebody else's kid is running around on the trash dump looking for old pieces of circuit board to burn over a fire to get the last little bit of metal out of, rather than you cutting and splitting your own wood and having a little smoke back into your room when you're not paying attention to it from the wood. Yeah, that's that comes to a divide in the way we see the world. And I kind of think if I'm gonna be the one getting the warmth, the more of whatever downside there is to it, there is really ought to come back on me, maybe.
Speaking of Alan Booker, I think an important thing to work in here is that if we're talking about running a heat pump in Montana, where more than half the electricity that is generated in the state of Montana is coming from coal. It's like, wow, coal has a powerful reputation for poison, for being just outright poison. And burning coal and running, electricity from coal is such an environmental disaster. Millions of people, I believe it's millions of people per year die of respiratory stuff caused by coal, by burning coal. So it's kind of like, we're going to start there, but of course, it's killing people over there, not right here, right? Except for the fact that when you go way, way, way up into the wilderness where there is no coal power plant and there's not a coal power plant for hundreds of miles, you can't eat the fish that you catch in the lake because they've got mercury poisoning, and it's from all the coal plants across the world putting all of that mercury up into the atmosphere, and then it comes down and then it ends up concentrating in the fish in the most remote lake. And this is kind of a big part of how I got started with all of this is that I would go fishing a lot. And then I was like, no, surely I can go fishing out in the middle of the wilderness, which is where I normally went. And no, those are all poison too now. So the other thing is that coal is being dug up out of the ground. That was sequestered carbon. And we unsequestered it, and we added it to our carbon load on the planet in the atmosphere by burning it, as opposed to when we use sticks and trees and stuff like that. That's part of the natural carbon cycle, and so we pulled it off of the surface. So if we never touched any of this stuff in the ground, we wouldn't have global warming. There would be none of it. It's like you could burn all kinds of stuff. I don't think even if all humans heated with just wood, then we wouldn't be talking about climate change right now, or climate weirding or whatever it is. The carbon footprint would be a non-issue. But the fact that we've brought so much carbon out of the ground and then burned it, thus putting it into the atmosphere, that's the real problem. And then, of course, Alan Booker's presentation on carbon negative heat, where you actually operate a rocket mass heater in such a way with a woodlot that the woodlot gets bigger and healthier with each passing year, so much so that your total carbon footprint is negative. So
for every 3,000, his calculations are for every 3,000 pounds of carbon you put in the air by burning wood, if you're coppicing it on your own property, so you don't have the transportation costs, and you're putting rootstock into the ground and growing trees efficiently that way and leaving the rootstock in the ground, you're putting 20,000 pounds of carbon back into the ground for every 3,000 you burn.
So
that's pretty negative.
We have a carbon negative solution with rocket mass heaters, which is another thing too. The whole concept of the heat pump has been around for quite a while, and it has been a popular enough item that it has been very thoroughly optimized. And even as something that's very thoroughly optimized, it's got a lot of environmental scariness wrapped up in it. on top of that, I don't think it's going to be able to get much better than what it is now. With rocket mass heaters, I kind of feel like we still have a lot of room for optimization. Like this could get better and better and better and better and better. And so, all right, let's wrap up on carbon footprint. The key is that carbon footprint for mini splits. Now, keep in mind, in order to understand this, you have to first hear about how the average American carbon footprint is 30 tons per year. Now that's per adult, 30 tons per year, 30. And then a mini split has a carbon footprint of 18.4 tons. And an in-ground heat pump has a carbon footprint of 8.4 tons. And a rocket mass heater has a carbon footprint of 0.4 tons. And that includes the free half a cord of wood. So that means we're counting the half cord and the carbon footprint of that half cord that was burned. So, all right. Moving on from carbon footprint stuff. Let's see. We already talked about vulnerability to market volatility. Basically, at any given time, the cost of propane could double or triple, and there's nothing you can do about it. They just pick whatever the price is, and they do. They'll jiggle the number to try to get an idea of like how much they think they can get out of you. Pellet stuff is an interesting volatile market. You might have picked it up just 20 miles down the road or 10 miles down the road, and you would get tons and tons and tons of pellets. And then suddenly the mill shut down. And you used to get them for this sweet, sweet price. And now you have to drive 6 hours to get them for triple the price. And so the type of volatility is a little bit different. But, okay, really market volatility, we're talking about electricity. The bottom line is I think that across the nation over the last 2 years, the cost of electricity has gone up about 30%, has been my impression on average. And as we were looking at this, I think that we were finding that the average price of electricity was something like around 15 cents per kilowatt hour. But we found some places where it was more than triple that. And now I'm getting reports of, so it was like 45 cents. And now I'm getting reports of some places where it's 60 cents a kilowatt hour. I don't know, Mud, have you heard anything recently about the price of electricity in the last couple of years?
It's all over the place. It's, yeah, mine.
And Mud's gone. Oh, I don't know what happened. Crappy internet, maybe. All right. Let's see. Samantha says, all the costs of these things will go up. I have all the wood I will ever need on my land. The forest makes wood faster than I could ever use it. Ah, that is a brilliant, brilliant point. And Mud is back. Mud, you were trying to say something before you ditched us.
Yeah, pressing the wrong buttons again. The cost has been quite volatile in some areas. Where you live and where I live, it's fairly stable, thank goodness. But it has not as much volatility as propane. Natural gas is somewhere in the middle. Fuel oil is just awful for volatility of prices. So the less of the refined products you can use, like natural gas, you don't have a choice who's providing that. Electricity, you have a little bit of choice of who's providing the electricity, but not who's charging you for being plugged into the wires and maintaining the wires. And that can go crazy. Reports of people with um, enormous fuel bills, several times what they were used to during the cold snap in Texas a couple years ago, because during emergencies, the emergency rates pop in, and you've agreed by being connected that if the rate goes up 5 or 10 or 100 times for a few minutes or a few hours or a few days, you're going to pay that for the privilege of being connected. So the less reliant we are on volatile things, even with the rocket heater, the better insulated the house is, and the more we can close off parts of it that aren't easy to heat, the more comfortable we are with less. And we can put more wood in a hugelkultur and grow things on it and eat them rather than burning them. So yeah, the volatility of all of these resources can get to us no matter where we hole up.
Let's talk about estimated lifespan. So for all the heat pumps, in fact, with the in-ground heat pumps, it sounded like, because of course, once you've kind of dug the hole and buried all that pipe in there, that stuff's going to be fine. You're not going to have to dig that back up and replace that pipe. But it did sound like there were some components in an in-ground system that would need to be replaced a lot sooner than the average 14-year lifespan. But that was kind of a fascinating thing, that as we were digging into it, I mean, we went with 14 years because that was provided by the industry. But we were finding a lot of cases where people were having to replace it in less than 10 years, which is a little brutal considering that it's like, oh, it's going to save you something like $1,000 a year, but it costs $10,000 to put it in. And then if you have to replace it in 7 years, then you didn't exactly save money, and you didn't exactly make the environment better either, because these things are a pretty healthy sized contraption filled with a lot of toxic gick. And so the construction of this thing and the environmental footprint behind this device, this massive contraption, is substantial. And so the idea that you have to replace it every 7 years is brutal, but 14 years is the average. But even at 14 years, it's kind of like a little bit of an edge case. And on top of that, in order to get it to last 14 years, you've also adopted some annual maintenance. And granted, there are some people that can DIY their annual maintenance, but it seems like most people have to pay for the annual maintenance. And, granted, it's going to be $150 for somebody to come out and do a little of this and that and check, but there might be that occasional $500 bill instead of the $150 bill.
Well, and what if one of the parts becomes made out of unobtainium? I really enjoy, oh no, something broke on my rocket heater. Slap a little cob on it, and I'm good for a while. Finding a new part for a company that went out of business or changed their business model because they weren't making enough money on that old one. There are companies that you can get parts to replace parts on 40, 50-year-old systems. That's that's a treasure, something that's simple to fix and keep going. But being at the mercy of people whose job is to make more money for their shareholders. So let's have you have to have a monthly charge for an app to be able to turn things off and on. That's just that just sucks you back into the machine.
So you're right. It's possible that you could be 6 years into ownership, and then you need a part that used to be just $20 to keep your stuff going. Only that part is no longer available. And really the only other option now is to buy a whole new unit. And it's only been 6 years. So whereas, the rocket mass heater, this thing went weird because the kids, were a little too rambunctious in there or whatever. And it's like, I need to go out and grab a handful of mud and smear it into the, this spot, and I'm golden again, and I'm back in business. If you wanted to, you could go buy a bag of clay and buy a bag of sand and make your own cob and use that, and you're still golden. You're all set. And that, still, I mean, what is a bag? I don't even know what a bag of sand goes for these. If you got a bag of sharp sand, is it $10?
No, not even 5, 6. It costs you more to drive out and get it.
Yeah.
But I had somebody here local who bought a house because they fell in love with the fact that a rocket heater had been installed in it several years ago, and then they couldn't get the thing to work very well, and we had to rebuild it to be able to get inside of it to clean it, because there weren't any clean outs put in some of the places. I put a YouTube video series up on it, on what we had to do to it. But the funny thing to me was that we completely revamped that thing for less than $1,000, without ruining the beautiful sculpted bench, and that would have taken a lot of time to rebuild. Got it roaring in a day. So the technology is simple enough that you can redo it when you find out something's not working right. When the insides of the rocket heater start to crumble because you've been burning it too hot, or you find out you did something less than ideal, you can fix it.
I would say that, first of all, you and I have been working on a book for a long time, but we took a chapter of the book and we made it available for sale to people. I think it was part of a Kickstarter or something like that, but I think that particular book is very good. The Rocket Mass Heater Risers ebook.
Yep.
But I think that when we made rocket mass heaters 10 years ago, that the way that we did it was 90% of the way to what we do today. Does that sound about right? What was done 20 years ago was crapulent. Maybe 15 years ago. I remember 15 years ago using metal inside the riser. And we've gotten way past that.
We've come a long way, baby.
But our current, like right now, the one here in the Fisher Price house, this is 10 years old. We haven't done a thing to it. I mean, it looks like it's got another 80 years to go. It still looks brand new. But I think, when we did this, how long does it last? The average lifespan, we said 40 plus years. I think, we did rebuild the one in the library. That was also 10 years old. And we rebuilt the one in the library just like a year ago, but it was working okay. We just wanted to try new experiments.
I think that's the major danger, is that most of mine die not because they stopped being useful, but because I got a better idea. And I got in trouble. I sold the Liberator in the living room without telling my wife, and she went to sit on her bench and warm her hiney, and there was no heater there, even though I made a good little bit of money off of it because they weren't manufacturing at the time. I was in the doghouse where it was cold. Yeah, these things, these things, we tinker with the fire. That's one of the pleasures of the rocket heater is poking at the fire every time you walk by, and thinking about a better idea and whipping it up on a Saturday afternoon is kind of fun for some of us, and it's not so fun for others of us. So yeah, I have considerably smaller lifespan on my rocket heaters than we're talking about. And if you use the right materials, then a rocket heater is just basically a masonry heater, and those designs have been around for 1,000 years, and they go hundreds of years with very little required to rebuild them. So it's a decent thing compared to something that wears out.
I think it's possible that there could be some rocket mass heaters that were built 10 years ago where the materials that were used for the riser maybe didn't do so good.
Yep.
And so as we wrote that risers ebook, we kind of covered a lot of those things. And we talked about, if you make your riser this way, the problem with this design is that it will last only 3 years. And then if you make it this way, the problem with this design is that it'll only last 3 weeks. And I see too many people building something, and then it's like, I built it, and then they bolt and they leave the rest to a user that did not build it, and so they're not able to repair it. And the materials that were used in the riser, where it can be pushing 2,000 degrees, was not an appropriate material choice. And so,
yep. A lot of people come into a new house that we've bought, having lived in an apartment or a condo where somebody else's job is to take care of all those infrastructure things. So we don't know how to do anything other than press the button to go up or down in temperature and pay pay the bill every month. We just don't know how to do that. And it's been a real, for me, you're going from a propane that was costing me $1,000 some months to heat my house in northern Ohio, to less than $100 a year with no cutting or splitting, because I was getting the cutoffs from the hardwood flooring manufacturer down the street. So $100 a year, and I still have some left over. That's financial freedom for me. And even if I have to fix it or rebuild it every year or every 5 years, or even if as long as I'm building something that's safe to operate, I can do that and save a lot of money, and compared to basically any other choice I've got. But there's a lot of us just don't have those choices because we don't have any experience working with these things. And yeah, I almost burned my house down with my first wood stove with a chimney fire because I didn't have any experience at the time. But that was 25 years ago. So
how many chimney fires have you had with a rocket mass heater?
Oh, none.
Why is that?
I only know of 2 in all of the people I talk to anywhere. And if you burn green wood and other crap, you're gonna get a chimney fire even if it's a rocket heater. But if you're burning a rocket heater properly so there's no smoke within a minute or 2 of it starting up, then you're not going to have smoke condensing on the inside of your chimney, giving you creosote, and you're not going to have a chimney fire.
Yeah, that's one of the things we do is we have a lot of experiments that we do here, and it's like, well, let's try it this way, let's try it that way, because we used to host the innovators event. We used to like every other year. We haven't done it in several years, and that's a podcast in itself. But I would have to say that yeah, we haven't seen creosote here, except we had somebody that had they built themselves a little tiny cabin, and they had this weird little tiny conventional wood stove, and that had to be cleaned once a month, or else they would get a chimney fire. And so it's a very different game. I know that Bo has been through the chimney fire thing. How is creosote handled in the rocket mass heater? Basically, we try to domesticate the chimney fire. And so basically what a chimney fire is that creosote is going to get into the chimney of a conventional wood stove and build up. And then one day there's a fire where it's hot enough or something happens so that creosote, which is a fuel, is ignited and it burns very hot. And once it gets started, then it'll try to burn all the creosote all at once. And that's a chimney fire. And it'll burn very hot. It'll burn so hot, there's a very high probability that it'll burn your house down. Whereas basically a rocket mass heater has that riser, and then but the riser is insulated, so it tries to basically burn everything in the riser every fire. So basically we use the creosote as a tertiary fuel, and that's why our burns are so efficient. Hey, Samantha, isn't that boy in the background there? Shouldn't he be in school? Get to school, boy.
Oh, the boy, he's got the sick, so we keep him home.
So the sick means try to stare into the camera.
Yeah. Did you tell how sick he is?
If you're gonna take time off from school to be sick, you better go get in that bed and at least pretend to be sick. So you should at least you gotta fake it better than that. Oh, I'm so sick. I better stay in bed.
Well,
the sickness.
Homeschool, we're learning about our rocket mass heaters.
Oh, I see. All right. Okay. The key is that once it gets past the riser, there's really no smoke to make into creosote. There's nothing to make the creosote out of beyond there. And so our results have been that when we look, like with this one here in the Fisher Price house, we pop off the barrel and we look inside, that riser looks brand new. There's not a speck of anything on it. It's all been cooked off, whatever tried to accumulate there. Whereas like that little teeny tiny wood stove that I was just talking about, that thing was, pretty much choked with creosote. And basically, if you didn't go and clean it out, it would be so choked that it wouldn't function at all, and the room would just fill up with smoke.
Yeah, you don't wake up when you do that.
Oh, right. And then there's that. Yeah. Whereas running a rocket mass heater has been easy and delightful. And so, all right, we were talking about estimated lifespan. And the rocket mass heaters we're building today, I think, are going to easily last way beyond 40 years. But we just kind of felt like we shouldn't say a number bigger than 40 years because that's what the other things were claiming was 40 years. And so we kind of feel like, sure, 40 years, we'll take that. I believe that the oldest rocket mass heater is in Myrtle back in Coquille, Oregon. Is that accurate, Mud? Do you know? It looks like Mud has frozen. So anyway, I think that one was pushing 20 years old when I was there in 2009. So 35 years old or so. The barrel looks exactly the same. And that was one of the earliest designs of a rocket mass heater. Okay, Setting aside lifespan stuff, let's move on to when the power goes out. Clearly, a rocket mass heater is going to be the champion, and all heat pumps are going to just die. They're not going to be able to function at all. So you're going to freeze your nubs off. But now, to be fair, if you're going to go on vacation for 2 weeks in the middle of winter, the rocket mass heater is going to suck because there's nobody there to keep it going. And that's when a heat pump is glorious. Now, one of the things to point out is that at the end of our 2-minute video about this, that at the very end we said that, okay, a heat pump has a lot of advantages over a rocket mass heater, and a rocket mass heater has a lot of advantages over a heat pump. And what we recommend is both. Get both. That way, if the power goes out, fire up your rocket mass heater. And if you go on vacation, then let the heat pump take care of it. And
the heat pump also stops being efficient. The colder it gets outside, the less efficient the heat pump is, to the point where at about negative zero, from 0 to negative 20 is when even the most robust heat pumps just aren't putting out any more heat. And the rocket heaters draft really nicely at that point when it's that cold outside, and make a nice warm house. And at the other end of things, when it's 50 degrees and cold and rain, and 50 degrees and raining here in Northeast Ohio, it's just miserable. But there isn't enough of a temperature differential between inside and outside to get the rocket heater to go very well sometimes. And that's when those mini splits just shine. They're super efficient at sucking a little heat out of the outside air.
All true. Now, the problem when it's like 55 outside and the temperature inside, let's say, is 65, and you want to start a fire in a rocket mass heater, this is the weak spot. This is where a rocket mass heater is shit compared to a conventional wood stove. Conventional wood stove will not have as much of the cold plug problem that a rocket mass heater has. But the rocket mass heater is super efficient, but it comes at a price. And that price is the cold plug. And so if the temperature outside is really cold and the temperature inside is like 65, the rocket mass heater is amazing. It is. This is what it was made for. This is where it is crazy efficient, crazy good. Now, if the temperature outside is 55 and the temperature inside is 65, the rocket mass heater will still be crazy efficient. The problem is, the challenge is getting it started. Getting it started can become a pain in the ass. However, most of the time that we're trying to start it through the winter, the temperature outside is so much colder than inside, it starts really well. It's very easy to start. It's when the temperature outside is close to the temperature inside, it becomes so challenging, so difficult. The cold plug is the price to get all this efficiency. And so there's ways to mitigate the cold plug, but that takes extra time. And and Gilligan's oftentimes can't be bothered with even knowing about what a cold plug is, let alone taking the extra time. So that's the weak point, but it's still efficient. It's just hard to start. Whereas that's another thing is a heat pump. Well, you know what's funny though? In fact, I'm going to say so here's all this winter, we have heated exclusively with the rocket mass heater. We have not turned on the heat pump even once because we have a heat pump now. We took all that propane out because I got to the point where I was sick to death of the sleeves. The sleeves was way too much. I just didn't want any more of that sleeves. It had to go. So we got rid of that. We put in a heat pump in case this building is ever empty during the winter. We have a backup heat source. Now, I gotta say, we've never turned it on, but we did have one day when it came on. And so basically we were running the fire and we probably let it go a little too far. I think we got it up to 78 in the house. And it's like, usually what we do is we let it get up to like 76 and then we cork it. And then over the next 3 or 4 hours, it drops down to 72 pretty quickly. But then it'll hold that. And the next morning it'll be like 69. And so, but usually we stable out, we drop a bit and then we stable out. All right. But when we're running the fire, it's like, oh, there's the last little bit of the fire. And that's the other thing too, is it takes a bit to kind of get the fire going. And then the temperature in the room doesn't rise very fast. But once it's going, the temperature in the room does rise very fast. So we may have gone past 78 and the mini split turned on. The air conditioning turned on to try to cool the room because it was too warm, because the mini split is up near the ceiling, and up near the ceiling it was probably hotter than 78. And so the mini split, that's just silliness. It's not the fault of the mini split. What I am trying to say though is that as much as a rocket mass heater can be hard to start under the right conditions, a mini split, we've had trouble getting our mini split to start when we wanted it to start. Like we're sitting there fucking with the buttons like, come on, damn it. How many times do I have to push this button? And it can be a little weird that way from time to time. But like with the Fisher Price house, we generally never have a cold plug problem. The only time we have a cold plug problem that we have to deal with, and we have ways of dealing with it, we have to basically prime the rocket mass heater. Is usually like in a cold cabin. So the temperature of the cabin on the inside is the same as the outside. And so we have to prime it correctly. And I got a whole video about that. But the other one is that inside the shop. And so in the shop, it goes stone cold, and then we go in there to fire it up. And we're going to have to take the steps in order to be able to deal with the cold plug. Okay. Going back to the thing about how what we recommend is both. And there's a bunch of reasons why a heat pump is good. And there's a bunch of reasons why a rocket mass heater is better than a heat pump. And, but really, if you've got both, and the thing that we recommend is run the rocket mass heater whenever you're in the mood. It's better in a long list of ways. It'll save you tons of money. It's better for the environment. All the reasons. And the thing that the heat pump has going for it is the thermostat. So I suggest set the thermostat on the heat pump pretty low. That's what we do. So if anybody forgets to build a fire, the heat pump will come on. All good. But to heat the house, the heat pump has not come on at all this winter. We've done a real good job of keeping things plenty warm with the rocket mass heater. So, and then if you forget to run a fire, you don't feel like running a fire or whatever, all good. The heat pump will kick in and warm the place up. I think that the rocket mass heater adds luxury, because with the heat pump, you're usually going to set it low so you can save money and be good to the environment. But the rocket mass heater, what the hell? Go ahead and run it as warm as you want, whatever you think is comfortable. I mean, it's like what, 3 extra sticks or something? Who cares? You know, plenty more sticks where that came from. Oh, heat pump. It does have air conditioning. And so like if it's 107 outside, you can run your heat pump as an air conditioner, and it can bring it down to 75 inside. And it's like, oh, that's a pretty handy thing. Now, at the same time, a rocket mass heater will actually cool your home also. And I think it cools your home about 7 to 10 degrees. Now, I don't, Mud, do you have any philosophies about a rocket mass heater cooling your home?
So I would say it tempers the home pretty well. You have a big mass, and basically, if you think about a refrigerator that's full is a lot more efficient than a refrigerator that's empty, because in an empty fridge, the temperature that you're looking for is just stored in the air. You've cooled the air, and when you open the door to see what there is there in there to snack on, all of the cold air comes out, and then the fridge has to kick back on and cool down more air. Whereas if you have a fridge that's full of mass, basically, that when you open the fridge to look at stuff, the cold mass doesn't fall out on the floor generally. There's a lot less cool air to fall out on the floor, so that fridge doesn't have to come back on as soon. And a similar thing happens with a house that is massive inside, has a big thermal mass bench in it, or stone walls inside. If it's well insulated on the outside and stores the heat in a large mass on the inside, then it can be hotter outside, and when everybody opens the door, it gets a little warmer, but it doesn't get too warm too quick. It stays cool, and if you open the windows when it's cooled down at night, you're storing that heat in your thermal mass bench. And personally, I've got one of my installs is an 8-ton thermal mass bench on an uninsulated concrete floor that, it sucks a lot more heat into the floor from the fire until it warms up that floor in the winter. But in the summer, the ground sucks the heat out of that room very effectively through the mass of the bench. It's like having a 5-ton air conditioner in there. Passively cooling it works very well for that. And I'm saying tempering because even in the winter, it's, when I wasn't living in that space, I didn't have any heat on in there, but the plumbing didn't freeze even at -20 outside, because that mass was pulling heat up out of the ground into the room through the uninsulated floor, through the ground coupling of the floor. So yeah, you can temper or condition the heat, the air, both colder and warmer, with your rocket heater. And of course, if you only go there on weekends and it takes the whole weekend to warm the place up because you got a big mass bench, well, that was poor design. And you want to think about the amount of mass that you have, mass battery that you have in your space if you've got an edge case like that. But if you're living there and want it to stay the same temperature, that mass is going to definitely benefit you. The other comfort thing that I've found is that, so if my wife is warm, my life is a lot better. And the mini split will warm the air in the room, but it doesn't do a very good job of warming the walls of the floor or anything other than just pushing some warm air around. So your feet tend to get cold, and it's just, even even if you have it up to 75 or so, it's just not as comfortable, we're finding, as having this big mass radiating heat at you, or sitting your butt down on a warm bench. You don't care if the other side of the room is 50 degrees if you've got a warm bench to sit on.
So the point you're making, I think, is a really good one. And that is that the heat that you feel from a heat pump is, I don't know, it feels like and I don't have words for this exactly. This is going into art more than anything else, but it feels like it was manufactured in a factory. Whereas the heat that comes off of any wood burning device feels like homespun heat. Now, so I see Samantha's on the call, and she's talked to us a little bit so far, but she has said something in the podcast in the past that I think is an important thing I want to mix in here. And I want to hear, Mud, if you say the same thing, because I agree with Samantha when she says, okay, Samantha, say your thing.
Yeah,
you know what I'm asking about?
No, I don't.
The quality of heat from the rocket mass heater compared to a regular wood stove.
I think that a heat pump or somebody's regular heating, like I have electric heat, it's fine. It's basic needs and you're okay. But in your home, Paul, with your rocket mass heater or other rocket mass heater cabins that you have that I've been in, or your teepee, it warms you to your bones. And so you can be so comfortable inside that you can run outside without a coat, often without shoes in the snow. And I'm totally warm, where when I'm in my home, I'm comfortable, but I'm not so internally warm. I'm going to be more easy to get cold when I go outside. And I feel that the heat that comes from the rocket mass heater warms me so completely. And maybe it's because it is the conducted heat. I'm not sure why, but it feels better. And I think a wood stove feels better than a baseboard heater. I mean, I love wood heat. I love the experience of the fire. Another thing about your rocket mass heaters is you get to be with the fire. It's an open fire. I can hear it crackling. I can see the fire. And to me, that's such a joy. Like, I miss that from when I was growing up. I love the fire. And you get all the joys of having the glass wood stove door and more, because you actually get to see. I just want to sit there and stare at it. It doesn't need to be tinkered with, but I want to look at it.
Which a lot of people do. They hover over it just to stare at the fire. But okay, so I want to say that while it is true that if you have a rocket mass heater and you sit on it and you get the conductive heat, that is by far the most delicious heat, easily. And there's something soul feeding about that type of heat. But in an attempt to do a comparison between a rocket mass heater and a conventional wood stove, and I've run a lot of wood stoves in my life, getting the heat from a wood stove is very nice. Getting the same kind of heat, which would be radiant heat or convective heat, from a rocket mass heater is somehow better. And I don't know why, but it does feel better. It feels more delicious, more delightful, more luxuriant. There's something about it that just feels better. And so that was the thing I was fishing for, because I know, Samantha, you've said that before, that the heat from a rocket mass heater is somehow better than from a conventional wood stove. I don't know how you hold a ruler up to that.
Well, to me, it's like, it's so easy to just go outside and get some more wood. Like, I know there's endless wood. And every time I want to be a little bit warmer in my house and I have to turn up the thermostat, I feel like I'm taking. I mean, I know I'm taking because I'm going to pay more. But I also feel a little bad that I'm, I can't just put on a sweater. I have to take more from the grid, from the resources of the world. And my forest produces so much wood, it's good for it to pull some out. It benefits my forest. So I don't feel like I'm taking anything. I'm just treating myself awesome, or keeping my family so cozy. And I feel better.
I don't know about your forest, although I know that you had some wildfires in your area. Was it this last summer?
Every
But I know
summer.
where I am, wildfires are an annual thing.
Yeah.
And so if we don't go get that wood and bring it out, it's going to burn anyway, which would be another way of saying that this is a carbon zero heater.
Right.
It's like, well, it was either going to go up in a wildfire or we brought some of the wildfire fuel in here instead, you know, so it's still going to go up in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide, but, you know, at least now it's heating our home. So zero, carbon zero, no matter which way you look at it, carbon zero. All right. All I wanted to do was to say that there is a weird sensation, and that where any kind of wood heat has a better feeling to it than any of the electric forms of heat, with the possible exception of that electric in-floor heating, where it kind of, that is very nice, but we can do that with rocket mass heaters as well. And then I wanted to say the feeling of a rocket mass heater compared to a conventional wood stove, somehow that just feels way better, and I don't know why, and I don't even know how to describe it.
It's faster.
So,
I mean, if I fire up my cast iron wood stove, it's a while before I get much heat. Whereas if you put you just fire up your stove and it's coming straight, your rocket mass heater in your house, it's coming straight off that barrel so quick. It's instantly heating me. And then, of course, for like we showed in the video, easily 24 hours, your house is so comfortable.
We just put the paper in to kind of get it started, and you're feeling that within 10 seconds. Yeah. It is pretty awesome that way too. But now I want to throw out Alan Booker's word, biophilic.
Yes, I love that word.
So at first when I heard it, it's like, I was having a hard time with it. Why can't you just say, you know, but no, now it is really sticking, and it seems like I got to say it all the damn time. But basically biophilic is saying something about how if you interact with nature, it builds your soul. And so there's an interaction with nature when you hold the stick in your hand. Mm-hmm. And so you have a biophilic vibaroonie. And then when you place it into the wood feed and burn it, and then you observe the fire, that is also biophilic.
Yes.
When you stack the firewood outside is biophilic. When you cut down the tree or you cut up the wood or whatever, that is biophilic. And so you've got this collection of biophilic experiences that happen for you to heat your home. Plus the biophilic thing that as a gardener, you can grow your own heat. That is biophilic. And so there's this long series of biophilic that feeds your soul that you do not get with a heat pump. And I think another thing is like, and it's not on my list to talk about, well, later on, some people say that they're going to go off grid with a heat pump. And it's like, holy shit, that's going to be a lot of extra solar panels you're going to have to add on to your system to be able to run a heat pump in the middle of winter, especially here in Montana. I mean, we're farther north, like our sun, the amount of sun we get isn't quite as much as what the people in California get or the people in Texas get. And while you can do it, it's like the expense. So you at the expense of the actual heat pump. And I kind of feel like if you're going to try to heat your house with mini splits, that's going to be nuts. If you're going to do it with solar, that's going to be crazy. Surely that's too crazy. And then other people are going to do it with an in-ground heat pump, which is crazy light. It's still a lot of power. It just seems like if you're going to be off grid, the way to do it is a rocket mass heater. Now, most people do off grid, and they've got a conventional wood stove, and they're burning like 20 cords every winter in order to stay warm. Now, of course, if you got a humble cabin, you're probably going to be doing like 3 cords. But that's another thing too, is when I go to present about rocket mass heaters and I ask people in the audience who heats with wood, and some people raise their hand, and I say, okay, of all the people who got their hand up, who heated their home last winter exclusively with wood? And about 3/4 of the hands go down. So they heat with wood, but just once in a while. But they call that heating with wood. And then I say, okay, of all the people that still have their hands up because they heated exclusively with wood, how many people kept the temperature above 50? All the hands go down. All of them go down.
Yeah.
And so we're waking up. In fact, Samantha, you made that video the other day where you let the fire go out, and then the afternoon it was like, and you did a morning fire in the afternoon, it was like 72, and the following morning it was like 10 degrees outside and it was 69 inside. And so it's easy to keep the temperature well above 50, even on a really, really cold day.
Even only running the fire once a day and for an hour-ish. Very easy.
And we had days where it was 20 below this winter. Did we? No, we got to 25 below here. And when it's 25 below, I don't think we got it below 65 indoors. And so we kept it very warm. All right. Biophilic. With a rocket mass heater, you can grow your own fuel. To me, that's just huge. That's such a big part of it right there. I mean, there are people who live off grid and they have to travel into town twice a month to go get the propane tanks filled. And it's like, I'm living off grid. No, you aren't. That propane is the grid. And so I then at the same time, there's all the people who are heating with wood, and they're trying to keep their fires going 24/7 and failing at it. And with a rocket mass heater, it's just so easy. All right, the ability to grow your own fuel. The other thing is that when you've got a conventional wood stove, trying to store that much wood to get you through a winter, because you got to dry it. You got to get it nice and dry before you try to burn it. Trying to store 6 cords of wood is a giant endeavor. Whereas for us, trying to store 0.6 cords of wood is a piece of cake. It's like this. And then it's like, it's just easy. And then like, oh, we have to refill the little wood rack in the house like once every couple of weeks. It's so easy. There's so little wood we have to deal with. And of course, we're able to burn home waste. So cardboard, junk mail, things of that nature, little scraps of paper that package something or another. I think the famous one is the pizza box. We don't have any pizza boxes here, but you can't recycle a pizza box, but a pizza box does great in a rocket mass heater. All right. That is all the stuff that's packed into that 2-minute video up on YouTube. I do have some more notes for this podcast, but we're 2 hours into this. Maybe I should save these notes for another time. Or Mud, do you want to? Okay, gives me the thumbs up. I gotta
go get kid, so I gotta check out.
I'm going to read the list real quick, and then we'll be done. Does that sound all right?
Yeah.
The heat from a rocket mass heater feels better than the heat from a heat pump, and we talked about that. Carbon negative heat, we already covered that. The environmental footprint of creating a heat pump, we did cover that. Off grid, we talked about that. A heater tied to the grid makes you vulnerable. Mud has a lot to say about that. That's a mud point. Freaky Cheap Heat, the new movie we're about to come out with. We did a little over a year ago, record and build in order to save Europe. Then there was political comedy, which doesn't matter because all 3 builds went a year past their due date. We're still going to make excellent free videos. Rocket mass heater innovation. I have a note. I thought by now I would be a has-been. Oh yeah. Where's all the other innovators carrying all this stuff about rocket mass heaters? I thought I'd be done with this by now. Other people much smarter than me would be carrying it. Do enjoy all the love from other rocket mass heater builders that verify 1/10 the wood. Thank you. Nice to hear after years of people saying bullshit. Before the heat infographic, how to tell 100 million people. We want to tell 100 million people about rocket mass heaters. Anyway, we talked about that. And if we get money, we will put it in the promotion of this vid. So somewhere there's a link about this. Oh, there it is. If we can get $5,000, just give it to me. Just hand me actual money. We will take it and then we will hand it to YouTube, who in theory will show this video to so many more people. I think that the video really does a great job of summarizing the importance of a rocket mass heater and, hopefully will affect massive global positive change. Okay. If you like this sort of thing, come on out to the forums at permies.com, where we talk about rocket mass heaters, homesteading, and permaculture
all the time.